What's the problem with your favorite restaurant? You, according to Corey Mintz, a food reporter and author for the New York Times. Mintz suggests that the issue plaguing restaurants extend beyond labor shortages and internal management. He's blaming tipping and customer expectations. We'll dig into these opinions and more on this episode of the Restaurant Growth Show podcast. Let's grow. Welcome to the Restaurant Growth Show podcast, where we talk about how operators can use technology to grow their business. We've got a lot to talk about in this episode, but first, let's introduce our co-host. With more than 25 years of experience, Jose Albas has successfully founded and operated companies in software and hospitality. Lastly, who am I? My name is Gordon. I am your host. I have over 16 years in the food service industry with more than a decade in technology startups. This podcast is sponsored by Dine Pricing, real-time restaurant profitability. Dine Pricing uses artificial intelligence to improve restaurant profitability by dynamically updating menus across digital channels like Uber Eats, like DoorDash, like Grubhub, all of those things. Jose, what's going on today?
What is going on? A lot is going on. I always say a lot is going on because it is. And today it is a very awesome. I love this article. I love this research. I love what it's saying. We've seen these signals. I love because it's a lot of signals, micro signals and things about the future that we've been talking about here before in the show that validates or that it's in alignment with some of our guests. So I'm definitely looking forward to diving in.
Yes, absolutely. This is the first time I've actually heard of Corey Mintz personally, and I did a quick little dive on him as an author. He's a freelance food reporter. He's done the New York Times. He's been with the Globe and Mail. I got this article actually sent to me earlier today, and I thought this guy has some pretty strong opinions and some polarizing opinions on what's happening with the restaurant industry and posing some solutions that may ruffle some feathers, but in actuality is pretty in line with what we've been talking about for a really long time. And I kind of want to dig into this article. So what I've done here, Jose, is I've broken up the article into three segments, and we're going to talk about each segment. So segment one, we'll talk about the current state of the restaurant industry and its challenges. To our listeners, this isn't going to be much new to you. A lot of things that we've talked about in the past, the challenges and what's been happening post-pandemic. In the second segment, we'll talk about workforce issues and what staffing is like and what management is like. And then segment three, these are more of the solutions that Mint is talking about in the article. And obviously what we'll do is we'll share the article with our listeners in the description of the podcast. But let's kick this off with the first segment here. Mintz goes on to talk about the post-pandemic struggles, including slow service, disorganized staff, and incorrect orders. As guests, we're all experiencing this to a certain extent. Is this a trend that's going to continue, or are we looking at some underlying real issues with the industry itself? Jose, what is your take on the current state and Corey Mintz's take on the state of the industry?
My stand has, since I first got into this industry, to be honest, I've always seen, and I think even before I was doing it with other industries, like years ago, I was a social media influencer teaching people how to use social media, right? And I was always fascinated about the adoption of technology, that hence being a a technology entrepreneur. And then when I went into hospitality, the focus, it was so fascinating to me to see how slow the adoption of new technologies, but also systems and things that is there, that reluctance to change. It was next level, something I had never experienced, even though I had been consulting in all sorts of different sectors. And what that gave me as an entrepreneur is such a wide range of possibility to help, to inform, to do business with, for it, just incredible. So I see as a huge amount of possibility. And one of the main things that for me, this part of the conversation or the article, is that the pandemic, imagine it's a pandemic that had to happen for the restaurant industry to start paying attention to technology because they had to. There was no other way, right? Now, the biggest lessons that there should be there is that there are other things that they may be missing out on, and that there may be such a fear for consumer behavior to be transformed, to be impacted. It is so risky, but it makes sense because margins are, in most of the cases, again, the classic 3 to 5%.
Early on in the article, as Mintz is talking about guests experiencing slow service, disorganized staff, incorrect orders, like I was talking about, he also references a 2023 report from the National Restaurant Association indicating that 400,000 fewer hospitality workers compared to 2020. I don't think that's going to surprise anybody. Another stat that's not going to surprise our listeners is that 80% of restaurants are understaffed. And this is the state of the industry. And so they need to be looking for solutions, technology solutions, rethinking their training models, how they're treating staff, their compensation packages. All of these things need to be reconsidered. It's having an immediate impact on the operational efficiency and ultimately on the customers that are coming through the door.
It's totally like back in the 90s re-engineering, where it was like do big changes, big impact transformation. And at the same time, it is not. It can be a Kaizen, can be a continuous improvement process, strategically chosen what to start changing. But it has to happen because, like you said, 87%. That is a
That's everybody. That's everybody. That's everybody.
Exactly. That's everybody's understaffed. So, and to identify, which was one of the things that in the article, it was an eye opener because it was like you could have the sense, but you could never really point your finger at it. And he says that there was a lot of the culture. I mean, that like the main reason why people left after that pandemic transformational impact in human beings was that it was the quality of management.
Yeah.
That quality of management. We could maybe all see it, maybe wait staff and the whole staff was maybe badly managed, but that's what we had to deal with. That same, they were also, and everybody's supporting that things where this is how it is. But that was surprising to me. I was like, really? I mean, not we suspected. We've seen cases of things, abuse and stuff and litigation, like so many things that were happening before, but somehow it was like, oh, just go to the next restaurant or just the next thing, or right. And you know that this is one of those topics that fascinates me is where does the tip go, right? Meaning that the other party is like, well, have you ever considered maybe tipping? It shouldn't be the way because it's not. It's dependent on the consumer that's going through inflation, that's going through challenges, to actually tip, and that was the biggest part of their pay.
Yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I wasn't sure where you were going with where does the tip go, but thank you for bringing me home on that.
Reason number 2 of the employee retention.
Yeah. I mean, back to your point about the labor shortage and high staff turnover. I think the businesses that gambled on the fact that after there was this mass exodus out of the industry, that over time the employees would come back. Those businesses that have gambled on that are losing, and they're losing badly. And they're the ones that are not doing their best to reimagine what the average restaurant operation looks like. And that looks like re-examining how you are compensating your employees, how you are treating your employees, what their training program is like, how you're onboarding them. And we'll get to this, but the tipping policies, and there's a couple of examples that Quince brings up that these restaurants have actually done away with tipping. And it's actually working for them, but we'll get to that. So I wanted to bring up another stat here from 2023. There's a Toast survey that highlights the key reasons for staff turnover. And that is number 1, bad management, just like we were saying, low pay, poor work schedules, negative culture, and a lack of growth opportunities. You throw 2 or 3 of those into one business and you're looking at a failing business. It's not going to happen.
Right. And what I love about this part of the conversation is that it reminds me of our friend Jason and how in his book he's basically teaching and telling restaurateurs it is a business. Treat it like a corporation. Growth opportunities, rotation of tasks, make them mitigate the risk of specialization in an industry that they could just rotate, feel fresh, be happy, create a culture of positive reinforcement and all the positive things. Happy employees, happy customers.
Yes, I'm glad that you brought up Jason. You're referring to our guest, Jason E. Brooks from episode 43. First of all, Jason, I know you're listening. I know you're watching. What's up, my guy? I will see you in a couple of weeks. He's coming back to the show, and we're going to hear all about his progress on his book and when it's coming out and all of these wonderful things. Jason wrote a book called Every Leader Needs Followers, and it's directly applicable to what the industry is experiencing right now in terms of bad management, negative culture, and lack of growth opportunities. And he lays it out simple, step-by-step procedures to really engage their employees, to get them back in line with being a part of a team, right? And that is just so critical, because back in the day, the restaurant industry, it was just it was a toxic environment. I gotta say, I've worked at some restaurants where it really was a challenging work environment, and nobody wants to come back to that, especially post-pandemic. So shout out to Jason E. Brooks. Go out and get his book. It's coming out really soon. Let's move on here, Jose, to some of the solutions that Corey Mintz was talking about. And he takes tipping head on, and he also takes on customer expectations and how they've actually gotten kind of ridiculous, in my opinion. Jose, why are customers' expectations so high when they all know full well that restaurants were one of the hardest hit industries in the entire world?
That same resilience of change and transformation, being spoiled. There's a lot of entitlement there, that it's supported with new generations and how things and education has happened, and selfishness. That, it's a lonelier world out there, and I think that all of those different things, including having gone through a pandemic, there's a lack of understanding of others. Like the world, I mean, especially North America, is becoming much more like that. It's crazy. Like, so that, I mean, without blaming, but it is, there's two episodes come to
Go
mind.
ahead and blame the Republicans. You can go. I
No, I
heard
was
it's
not going to
coming.
say that.
I
It just
hear it. It's coming.
So when the episode of, I can't remember the number, but I was talking about how expectations are now demands. And
That's right.
I talked about a path of how that's become, and where we, in business, we talk about like, oh, fulfill the customer expectations. No, these are now demands. It is so expected, it's so entitled that things are in a particular way. And a lot of it is because we are used to the adoption of technology that continues to always, you can take for granted anything that was older, that it should be like that. We believe that intuitiveness is something that should be applicable everywhere. And that's just a whole bunch of expectations that are converted into demands. That you have online ordering, that the restaurant is on Uber, or in all of them, that in this case, in real experience, that there is a wait staff there for you at all given times. Even if you're going through it, this should be the way it is. Only those that have been in the industry, when we came out of the pandemic, we were like, oh my God, and we were patient, but that's not who the traditional consumer is.
That's not the way it is anymore. That the empathy and the patience has definitely waned. And I think that is directly related to this outrageous tipping culture that has just gotten, I mean, we did a whole episode on tipping, and we will definitely revisit it again, because it's just such an ongoing conversation. There's a lot that's happening within this culture within North America alone regarding the complexities of tipping. Like, how do we solve it? How do we, having to tip before I receive my food, I personally take exception to. It's gotten out of control. And what these big corporations have done is they've turned us against one another.
Yep.
When the operators aren't the enemy here, the barista isn't the enemy, right? The big corporations are the enemy. And again, we did a whole episode on that, and I can get really heated when it comes to the fairness aspect of it. These corporations need to take responsibility. They need to shoulder some of the load, and they need to pay us better. Like, give me a break. Like, enough is enough. right? But I
I think.
also, sorry, go ahead, Jose.
No, no, I was just gonna say, I mean, I'm gonna be talking about this if it's not in the next Jose report, and the following one, updates on the third party tipping situation.
Great. Yeah. And so back to Corey Mintz's article here, he brought up a couple of examples where a couple of restaurant brands have implemented no tipping policies and counter service models, leading to lower turnover and higher profit margins, which is fantastic to hear. So Loca, Dorio, and Crudo y Nudo, I think they're
Loca de Oro and Crudo Enudo.
Thank you for that, Jose. And so these companies are showing other businesses that it can be done. You can get rid of tipping. You can implement certain policies that can change customer behavior and still work. And what it did for them is it lowered their turnover, which is fantastic news for them. And
Yeah.
I do want to bring up a piece of the article here that speaks to dynamic pricing. And obviously, that's near and dear to both of our hearts as a technological solution to these high costs and these market fluctuations that restaurant operators are experiencing day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute as a solution. And forgive me if I'm reading this verbatim, but I'm taking it directly from the article where Corey goes on to say other restaurants have begun to experiment with pricing. You might know it as dynamic pricing by name, but if you've ever booked a flight, a hotel room, or gone to the movies on a Tuesday, you might understand it intrinsically. Dynamic pricing is when the price of goods or services fluctuates based on demand. Well said. In a 2003 paper, Sherry Kimes, who we reference on the show all the time.
The guru of restaurant revenue management.
Yes, Sherry. Yes, shout out to Sherry. Please come on the show. She's a revenue management expert. She is the revenue management expert. She wrote that restaurants were ideal for dynamic pricing, but that it's rare to find because of how it could alienate customers. Quote, when confronted with dynamic pricing, customers react negatively. In a 2022 study that she conducted, people felt like it wasn't transparent or fair and that they weren't getting a good deal. Now, Corey goes on to say he's combating this statement made by Sherry. Corey says, some restaurants are beginning to challenge this research, however. Topolo Bampo in Chicago, again, I'm really sorry. It's a Michelin-starred tasting menu restaurant run by chef Rick Bayless. In late 2023, after 35 years, Bayless decided to try dynamic pricing, raising the dinner menu on weekends from $165 to $185. The goal was not to increase revenue during peak periods, but to stimulate demand at slow times to better manage staff scheduling and inventory. It's been only a few months, but he told me the pricing had already driven up demand for slower weekdays with no complaints from customers. So I really wanted to point that out because that's a solution that I think is being implemented in real time. It is working for this restaurateur, and we're seeing it more and more often. So it's not all doom and gloom. There's solutions out there, even though, dynamic pricing in store is not something that necessarily we would recommend, but hey, it's being played around with and it is working for certain restaurateurs.
I know, and the thing is, something that it's very important to always keep in mind about price elasticity is that it varies by market. Like Michelin star people, another $20, no problem. I guaranteed that I can come in. No problem. Because the people that are in the edge or at the bottom of the elasticity, the most sensitive people, can book when it's down, when the happy hour times are available, and they can enjoy the Michelin at a more affordable price. And actually, they may be able to even offer more happy hour or a further, deeper happy hour to bring in more new people that want to try. So it's a win-win. The thing is that what was fascinating to me was the range. I mean, we're talking about 15 to, what was it, 65 to 85, like
Yeah, so it's
$20.
about 15%. Yeah.
So it varies, and the technology is there to support and to prove and try new things. I mean, it is just the beginning of all of this.
Agreed. Well, that is all the time we have for this episode. I'm going to end with these thoughts. A fundamental transformation in the operation and treatment of employees in restaurants is critical. Adopting innovative strategies like dynamic pricing, open book management, and a revised labor model is crucial to tackling dwindling profit margins and persistent labor shortages. Both restaurateurs and guests need to be open to embracing these changes, recognizing our role in securing a sustainable future for the restaurant industry. That's all the time we have for this episode. Until next week, say goodbye, Jose.
Goodbye, Jose.
Thanks, everyone.